Hi everybody, my name is Vex. The year is 2019. I have at this point been playing MMORPGs for 2 decades. This particular genre of gaming is what I'm passionate about and the focus of this video, although elements of it I'm sure will apply across all facets of gaming. I'm the proud owner of a bombastic, pixel-crushing computer that I've painstakingly built and customized to play the latest games on the highest settings. And yet, more often than not, I find myself drawn to older retro games. Most of them require me specifically to configure my PC to run them by lowering resolutions and tinkering with compatibility modes, and in spite of the extra effort, I am willing to do it, because these titles offer a more fulfilling experience. Why is that? In this video I aim to try and outline what I feel is the biggest reason why older games are more compelling and more satisfying than their modern counterparts. Now right off the bat, I know that the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people is going to be that I'm driven by nostalgia. I am, however, happy to report that after tens of thousands of hours playing various older titles, I can 100% discount this reasoning. It is true that when firing up a game I haven't played in a long time, there is an initial rush of dopamine that comes with familiarity and fond memories. But these are quite fleeting usually, lasting anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, and after they fade away, you're then left with the reality of the game that you are playing. It's either enjoyable, or it's not. I can guarantee you that I would not sink a few hundred hours into a game that I was not enjoying, just because I had played it sometime previously. I am after all a realist, and I make a point of not wasting my spare time doing things that I don't like. When I sat down to write this script, I first thought that I'd create a list of things that I prefer about old school MMOs. But as I compiled the list, I realised that all of the items on it were related to the same thing, and that thing is difficulty. So instead, here are my thoughts on all of the good things that come from games being uncompromising, and how simplifying or removing the bits we don't like can be bad for us, but also bad for the games that we play. As varied as they are, taking place in a myriad of different settings, biomes, and versions of reality, all older MMOs have one thing in common. They are more difficult than their modern brethren. Now please understand that this is not to say mechanically difficult. Combat in vanilla EverQuest, for example, is far slower and needs far fewer inputs per second than, say, World of Warcraft. And encounters lack the complexity of WoW. But they were difficult in their own right because your character was far closer in power level to that of your enemy. You were, in most cases, just a guy or a girl. You were one of many in your chosen class, be that weapon-wielding warrior or a finger-wiggling spellcaster, trying to make your way in the world. You had finite resources, combat was brutal and unforgiving, and a mistake would mean far more time recovering from the fight, if you survived. Or, even worse, if you died, even more time recovering your corpse or possessions, or lost experience, or all of the above depending on the rules of the game you were playing. The initial levels were a sobering experience, and taught you quickly that you were not the chosen one. As cool as your combat abilities or spells may be, level 1 enemies in your starting area could humble you very quickly if you had a few melee attack misses, spell resists or fizzles, or outright decimate you if you made a mistake and ended up with more than one enemy. So what do? You adapt. You change your tactics, you respect the world and the enemies so that you may overcome them, and you learn to survive. This most common of RPG tropes, the building of power and knowledge to progress, is the first building block of an MMO, and a remnant of the genre's tabletop origins. It is the foundation upon which all other systems are built, and if developers get it wrong, no number of bolted-on systems or theme park rides will be able to keep the world relative or engaging. It is true that learning to play a game can be a barrier of entry for some players. Some players may struggle enough initially that they become discouraged and leave. But I posit that making the game easier so that everyone can play it is far more harmful to the health of an online world. Without a learning curve, there can be no sense of mastery. Games are by definition an exercise in problem solving, and one of the best ways to create problems in an MMORPG is to pose a threat to the player. This one fundamental truth creates many avenues for a player to feel a sense of mastery, to feel like they are improving and overcoming the game world. From navigating hostile areas safely to selecting targets that you can defeat, moving that enemy to a place where you can kill it safely, managing your resources, learning to play your class efficiently, All of these things become skills you can master, and skills that set you apart from less seasoned players. Now compare this paradigm to a more accessible modern title, where your character can kill many enemies at once, the world poses no threat, inefficiency is not punished, and there are no penalties for failing. With this one change, all that previous gameplay disappears. The skill-based loop is set aside in favour of accessibility and ease of play. This does mean that players feel at home right away, and they progress quickly, but the whole experience is far less compelling. The game isn't teaching them anything. It is not forcing them to learn or to get better. The experience is shallow and as such, far more likely to become boring. My opinion is that if you're not being forced to think or to overcome something, what's the point in playing a game at all? You may as well be clicking your mouse on a blank screen or watching a movie. We play games to improve, to learn. It's in our nature. So we've just covered how removing difficulty can rob players of challenge and the chance to learn and improve. But if we zoom out and view the game at a social or community level, you'll see that the consequences ripple out much farther than that. Let's say that you're a max level character and you've conquered everything that your virtual world has to offer. You have your best in slot gear and a bank full of gold. How do you spend your time? What if, let's say, you decide to go and help those who are new and struggling? You could spend some time playing as a bodyguard, jumping in to save the lives of lower players if combat goes awry. You could choose to help indirectly by casting your powerful high-level buffs on low-level characters, so that they can earn experience faster for a time. You could try and find a new character and hand out some of your old equipment, to give them a leg up in this hostile world, knowing full well how helpful it would be, having struggled through it yourself. Or do you take a fledgling, wet behind the ears noob under your wing for the day and show them the ropes, giving them instruction, taking them to some of the better hunting spots that you discovered along your way? All of these things are common practices in more difficult MMOs, and I have in fact met many players firsthand who, having achieved their own goals, spend their days online, helping and teaching others, and sharing their experience. This in essence becomes their endgame. You see, challenging worlds become a shared foe, and people band together to conquer them. Higher level players sympathise with the new because they've been there themselves. I have met many people over the years in just these ways. Some become lasting friends and stay in touch. Some go their separate ways to cross your path months later as a higher level character and recognise you. Some disappear never to be seen again, but in that moment they are grateful for the help. I have been thanked on many occasions for past kindnesses by strangers I had long forgotten. Some of them have told me how they paid it forward and passed that old sword to the next person who appreciated it just as much. These interactions are not guaranteed, however, but a demanding world means that they can happen. The moment you make a game too easy, all of these opportunities to work together, to help the less experienced, or foster friendships become far more unlikely. So not only does a trivial world take away from the individual, but it also strips the community of all the triggers that would normally spark interaction and cooperation between players. Now if we zoom out even farther again, we can talk about how lack of difficulty affects the world itself. World designers and artists spend countless hours creating virtual realms. They model mountains, rivers, plains, oceans, cities and everything in between for us to enjoy. In an MMORPG, the world itself needs to be one of the main obstacles. If you can run freely wherever you like, dragging tens of enemies behind you without fear of dying, moving in any direction that you please without thought or preparation, that world which took thousands of hours to create and populate becomes quickly irrelevant. Yes, I am looking at you, World of Warcraft. Moving through these spaces really must require thought and threaten consequence if they are to demand a player's respect. When you need to be careful getting from A to B, you are forced to learn the geography of the place you're in. You might discover routes that are safer than others, or ways which are impassable until you become stronger. You will look for any advantage your class might provide to make things easier. This even lends weight to certain classes that might specialise in stealth or movement speed. You see, this gives them value. Some players may choose a class simply because it allows easier travel in the outside world. Druids in EverQuest spring to mind, with their run speed buffs and teleports. Even if they are deficient in other areas, many people choose to play them purely for their nomadic playstyle and ability to earn gold by moving people from place to place. Classes like this build their identity around conquering this particular facet of the game. They are able to claim mastery over travel, and that is very appealing to some. Another way that a world without threat can be harmful is by being too easily accessible. Whenever I play an MMO, one of the big motivators is to see all of the content that the game has to offer. I'm a big supporter of the idea that not everyone should get to see everything. The mystery of what lies at the bottom of a dungeon, or at the hidden edges of a hard-to-reach map, or an unmarked shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean can be a huge catalyst for fun. You may not be able to reach the final room of a dungeon due to your group not being strong enough. So what do? You learn to build better groups. You improve yourself, you optimize your gear, you research maps and ask advice. Maybe it turns out that you're just too low a level and you need to move somewhere else and come back when you're stronger. But having that unsolved mystery in the back of your mind gives you purpose, a reason to become more powerful. Making areas of a game purposefully inaccessible is a hard thing for devs to do. They might pour their heart into an area that only a few handful of players will ever get to see. But just the thought that that unknown corner of the world exists, that some portion of the game has not been completed, can drive players to greatness. One example that springs to mind is Naxxramas in vanilla World of Warcraft. Not many people got to see it. Not many people had the time or the resources to be able to complete it. But as a player in that world at the time, who had zero aspirations to clear Naxxramas, I still really enjoyed knowing that it was out there. Some insurmountable goal, off in the distance, that while not for me, gave the game world mystery and wonder. I really do think that it's important for places like that to exist. As you can see, making a game too easy has far and wide-reaching consequences. Whilst I'd not say that I enjoy things being difficult just for the sake of it, I very much do enjoy all of the opportunities for varied gameplay, cooperation, self-improvement, mystery, adventure, and memorable moments that come along with it. I like helping people, and I like being helped. I like feeling dwarfed by the world and feeling like a lowly adventurer trying to find a foothold. I like exploring caves and nooks and unpopulated corners of maps. I like learning and using every trick my class possesses to make certain things easier, and asking for the help of other classes when they can do something that I cannot. I like spending hours learning a dungeon, room by room and level by level, spending enough time there that I memorize enemy spawn locations and timers and patrol routes. I like feeling that I have earned each level and the incremental advantage it offers over the ones that came before. All of these things that I like are innately tied to difficulty, and while I, like anybody else, do not enjoy struggling, I do love succeeding at something that I've had to work for. In old school MMOs, a lot of players really form an attachment to their characters. They've been with them from the beginning, materializing at level 1, naked and scrabbling to survive, fighting for every skill up, every piece of armor, slowly growing and evolving over time, becoming the embodiment of the hours of effort they have poured into them. I have 12 max level characters in World of Warcraft, one for each class, always geared and ready to go. I've had some of those characters for 14 years at this point, and none of them mean much to me anymore, because I know that if anything were to happen to them, I could replace them and be up to speed again in a matter of days. It used to be that new characters started with far less than they do in games today. In classic EverQuest, there was no world map. Players did have the ability to work out which direction they were facing, but this skill started at 0 and needed to be practiced before it became reliable. Weapon skills as well had to be practiced. You could not equip a sword for the first time ever and expect to be good at swinging it. This system tried to replicate, in-game, the mastery that a person in real life would achieve by practicing at something. Whilst not being a perfect representation and far easier to skill up than in reality, I do appreciate the gesture and the nod to tabletop RPGs. This system also rewarded preparation and planning. It gave you something to think about, always being sure to keep a weapon of each type close at hand and swapping them in and out to keep your proficiency up, and managing your inventory space and weight so that you could carry said weapons and still have room for loot. Systems like these are relics of old game design, from a time when the RPG mattered just as much as the MMO in MMORPG. While it is true that a balance must be struck between micromanaging your character and streamlining the gameplay experience, I really do feel that the pendulum has swung way too far in the direction of ease of play. It's very hard to choose one specific thing and say that it alone is responsible for diminishing a player's sense of satisfaction, but the erosion of many of these elements over time definitely does take its toll on a game. And this is where I'd like to make my final point. Players do not always know what is good for them. We as humans are intelligent, and problem solving is in our nature, and this generally leads to us doing things the easiest or fastest way that we know how. When games are new, they come fresh from the creative vision of developers. They are at this point as close to what the devs envisioned as possible. Players then fill the world, they learn, they band together, they overcome, and they make do as best they can. Later, new content is added, and along with it comes quality of life changes. The harder or more monotonous tasks from the base game are made easier or removed altogether, and the players rejoice. Having already lived through these hardships once or multiple times, they're happy not to have to do them again when they level their next character, and so the game continues to evolve. These changes are always made with the best intentions, and some are indeed improvements, while others only remove difficulty. But here's the problem. You see, the pendulum only ever swings in one direction. Players will always welcome things being made easier, but moving in the other direction is almost impossible. This is why all MMOs become easier and more streamlined over time, and why the classic movement is such a big deal right now. The accumulation of these well-intended changes always culminates in the game straying from its initial vision. So those are my thoughts on difficulty and how it affects every aspect of an MMORPG, and why I derive so much satisfaction from playing older titles. I do like great graphics and being able to do everything myself quickly, just as much as the next guy. It's fun for a short while, but once the giant damage numbers and flashy spell effects fade away, I'm usually left feeling unfulfilled and craving something more engaging. Something just a little bit deeper. So I log off and I switch to something that makes me think. My name is Vex, and thanks for watching.